Everyone knows that the United States entered the Second World War after Pearl Harbor. It's one of the most famous facts in history, and it is almost completely misunderstood. Because here's what actually happened. On December 7th, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. The next day, the United States declared war on Japan. Only Japan, not Germany. For 4 days after that, America and Nazi Germany were not at war. Adolf Hitler had a clean, simple way to keep the most powerful economy on Earth out of his war entirely. All he had to do was stay quiet. And then, on December 11th, 1941, he stood up and declared war on the United States himself. Nobody forced him to do it. No treaty required it. His own advisors were terrified of it. He was already losing on one front when he chose to pick a fight with another giant on the far side of the world. It may be the single most self-destructive decision of the entire war, and to this day, historians call it one of the most baffling. So the question is simple, and it's enormous. Why did he do it? To understand how insane the timing was, you have to see where Germany actually stood in December 1941. This was not the Germany of 1940, sweeping across France in 6 weeks. By late 1941, the war had turned into a grinding monster. Hitler had invaded the Soviet Union that June, gambling everything on a quick knockout. It hadn't come. The Red Army had bent, but it had not broken. And on December 5th, just days before, the Soviets launched a massive counterattack outside Moscow, driving exhausted German troops back through the snow in the brutal Russian winter. In North Africa, Rommel's forces were locked in an endless seesaw campaign. Britain remained undefeated across the Channel. Germany was already fighting more war than it could comfortably handle. So the last thing on earth that Germany needed was a brand new enemy. And not just any enemy. The United States, a nation with the largest economy on the planet and a near bottomless capacity to build ships, planes, tanks, and guns. Adding America to the list of Germany's enemies was, on paper, suicide, which makes what happened next so hard to explain. Now, most people assume Hitler had no choice. They think he was bound by treaty to back up Japan. He wasn't, and this is the part almost everyone gets wrong. Germany, Italy, and Japan were tied together by something called the Tripartite Pact, signed in 1940. But that pact was defensive. It only obligated the members to help one another if one of them was attacked. It said nothing about coming to the aid of a member that started a war. And Japan had not been attacked at Pearl Harbor. Japan was the attacker, which meant that, legally and diplomatically, Hitler owed Japan absolutely nothing. He could have shrugged and let the Americans and the Japanese tear into each other across the Pacific, an ocean away from Berlin. His own foreign minister understood this perfectly. When the Japanese came pushing for a formal German declaration of war, Joachim von Ribbentrop stalled them. He knew Germany wasn't required to act, and he was afraid. He feared, correctly, that throwing the United States onto the pile would eventually overwhelm the entire German war effort. The caution was right there, coming from inside Hitler's own circle. And there was an even bigger reason to stay silent, one that had everything to do with a man in the White House. Franklin Roosevelt wanted to fight Hitler. He had wanted it for a long time. He'd been quietly arming Britain, escorting convoys, pushing his country closer to war for years. But he had a problem he could not solve: the American people. In December 1941, the public's fury was aimed squarely at Japan, not Germany. Polls at the time suggested only around a third of Americans supported going to war with Germany unless they were directly provoked. Roosevelt could not simply march into Congress and declare war on Berlin. The political support wasn't there. So think about what that means. If Hitler had done nothing, Roosevelt might have spent months, maybe longer, struggling to turn his nation against Germany, while America poured the bulk of its strength into the Pacific against Japan. Hitler was holding the door to his own destruction firmly shut, and then he walked over and threw it wide open. So we're back to the question that has puzzled historians for 80 years. Why? The answer isn't one single reason. It's a stack of them, and together they tell you something chilling about how Hitler actually made decisions. The first reason was that Hitler had convinced himself war with America was coming no matter what. And he wasn't entirely wrong. The United States was neutral in name only. Through the Lend-Lease program, it was shipping mountains of weapons and supplies to Britain. The U.S. Navy was escorting convoys across the Atlantic and had already clashed with German U-boats. Just weeks earlier, a German submarine had sunk the American destroyer Reuben James, killing over 100 American sailors. In Hitler's mind, America was already fighting him in everything but name. So why pretend otherwise? The second reason was hiding under the ocean. Hitler wanted to unleash his U-boats. As long as America was officially neutral, his submarine commanders were restrained from freely attacking the ships carrying supplies to Britain. A declaration of war cut that leash. In the months that followed, German submarines launched a devastating campaign against shipping right off the American coast, a period the U-boat crews would call their second happy time. But the third reason is the one that really matters. Contempt. Hitler genuinely believed the United States was weak. He saw a sprawling, multi-ethnic democracy that made jazz records and Hollywood movies, and he was certain a country like that could never fight a serious war. In his early war planning years before, the United States had barely even appeared on his map of threats. He had never traveled there. He understood almost nothing about its true industrial power. He looked at the most productive nation on the planet and saw something soft and decadent, and he believed his own propaganda about it completely. And that fed the fourth reason. He badly overestimated Japan. Hitler bet that the Japanese would crush or at least pin down the Americans and the British in the Pacific, keeping them tied up and far away from Europe. And he hoped that, in return for his loyalty, Japan would repay the favor by attacking the Soviet Union from the east and helping him finish off Stalin. That bet failed instantly and completely. Japan never attacked the Soviet Union. It honored its own neutrality agreement with Moscow. And because Stalin's spies had confirmed that Japan would stay out, the Soviets were able to pull fresh, battle-ready divisions from Siberia and rush them west. The very reinforcements that helped hurl the Germans back from the gates of Moscow in those exact December days. Hitler's gamble bought him nothing, and it cost him everything. On the afternoon of December 11th, Hitler stood before the Reichstag and delivered a long, furious speech, heaping the blame for the war onto Roosevelt. The usual mix of propaganda and ideological venom. The formal declaration was handed to the American representative in Berlin. According to a diplomat who was there, Ribbentrop's message amounted to a bitter snarl that Roosevelt had wanted this war, and now he had it. But the relief, in the end, was not in Berlin. It was in Washington and in London. Within hours, the United States Congress declared war on Germany. And this time there was almost no resistance, no agonizing political fight, because Hitler had moved first. He had personally handed Roosevelt the one thing he couldn't get on his own, a united nation ready to fight Germany. Across the Atlantic, Winston Churchill felt a wave of pure relief. His greatest fear had been two separate, disconnected wars. Britain and the Soviets against Germany in Europe, America against Japan in the Pacific, never quite joining up. Hitler had just erased that nightmare. America was now a full ally against Germany in both oceans at once. The numbers tell the rest. In 1941, the United States military ranked around 17th in the world. For years later, it was the most powerful force on the planet, and its factories had buried the Axis under an avalanche of steel. This is why some historians now argue that the day the world truly changed was not December 7th, the day of Pearl Harbor, but December 11th, the day Hitler chose to make an enemy he never had to make. And that is the haunting part of this whole story. Hitler didn't lose this one on a battlefield. There was no betrayal, no surprise attack, no twist of fate. He lost it standing in a room, making a decision that no one had forced on him, because he believed his own myths about an enemy he had never bothered to understand. He was handed 4 quiet days to stay out of America's war, and he threw them away. In the end, the most powerful weapon the United States had in December 1941 wasn't a battleship, or a bomber, or an army. It was the simple chance to be left alone, and the man who could have given it to himself chose, instead, to declare war. Thanks for watching. There are many more stories like this one waiting on this channel. So stay with us, and I'll see you in the next story.